Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Why. This week we have Parsha Beshalach. It's a fascinating Parsha. The Jewish people have left the land of Egypt, or they're leaving the land of Egypt now, and we have, of course, the really probably the most central of all miracles in the Torah, certainly of the Exodus itself, and that would be the splitting of the sea. And we have a number of sources here which seem to give us not different perspectives, but certainly different emphases of the same thing. So one of the sources talks about how this is Exodus chapter 14, verse 22. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. It's very dramatic, very miraculous, very overwhelming, right? It's supernatural nature. Right, we have the Song of the Sea in chapter 15 of Exodus. After the Jewish people have crossed to the other side, they sing about the waters piling up. The surging waters stood firm like a wall, so on. So it's very supernatural, very outside of something that is in our everyday experience. So there's no real explanation for how this is happening other than saying this is God doing it and it's of a supernatural nature. However, we have other texts in the same parsha, in the same few chapters, which seem to have a different emphasis. So we read in the 14th chapter, verse 21, Moses stretched his hand over the sea, and all that night God drove back with an east wind. Interesting. So all of a sudden now we're reading a bit of a different perspective, where it's not just about this miraculous event, but we're reading about God doing it by way of an east wind. So there's a bit of a naturalistic method in which God uses. We also read in 14 later in the same chapter about how God, the Egyptians, he made their chariots, the wheels of the chariots come off, and so they were stuck in the mud during the pursuit of the Israelites through the Reed Sea. So it's very interesting here. So we have a couple texts which seem to be saying it was a miracle, it was miraculous, and it was supernatural. And then we have other texts which seem to put a much more of an emphasis on, it was still God, it was still a miracle, but it was God working through natural means. So there's a different emphasis there. So how do we understand this then? One of the sources seems to be saying this was simply a miracle, period, is supernatural. Another one seems to be saying this was God working through nature. So this is ultimately for us, it's a total redefinition of the term miracle. According to the Torah here, really what the term miracle therefore is, it's not simply something which is outside of our natural explanation. This is probably often something that we would understand as a miracle. If someone were to ask us a miracle, we would say something that is outside nature, something we can't explain, and so on. But clearly here, according to the Torah, when it talks about God bringing the east wind, and splitting the sea, and God causing the chariot wheels that the Egyptians were using to fly off in the Reed Sea. These were well within the realm of nature. After all, what can be more typical and common than car repairs? So, but basically, ultimately, this is a lesson. And according to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, so how do we define miracle then, right? If a miracle can be something outside of nature, then, or within nature, so then are we saying that, if I have car trouble, it's a miracle? Or, if it's a windy day, it's a miracle? Or an ice storm, is that a miracle? How do we define miracle then? Does it lose all meaning? He says no. A miracle is something where it can be within the realm of nature. Like, for example, many people would say, and I'm not, that's a different discussion, many people would say the creation of the modern state of Israel in 1948 was a miracle. Now, everybody would say clearly there was natural means, it was the United Nations, there was, diplomacy and so on, but it still does not necessarily preclude the possibilities of a miracle. So obviously the fact that it was within the realm of nature does not necessarily preclude that fact. So how does Rabbi Sacks then, Jonathan Sacks, define what a miracle is? He says as follows: a miracle ultimately is something which causes a significant change among the Jewish people or among people in general, and it causes a sea change in their attitudes. And of course here, after this, we have the Jewish people. What happening was that they believed Moses and in Aaron, and we read in the Torah here, as a result of this, they believed in God and in Moses, his servant. So there's certainly a lot that can be said about this, but basically the take-home lesson is that in the Talmud, there's really no clear discussion as to ultimately which one this is. Was this a miracle outside the realm of nature, or was this something that God used? And in fact, that there's an ongoing discussion in Jewish liturgy about whether miracles are in fact a good thing or a bad thing. Let me give an example. In the Talmud, there's a story about a man and his wife died in childbirth. And so they were having a child, and of course there was nobody to breastfeed the child. So they had no, commercially available milk back then, and they had no formula, and and so God made a miracle for him, so he was able to breastfeed his child himself. And so what happened? So we have one commentator, we have Joseph in the Talmud saying, "What a great miracle! How righteous was this guy?" And Rabbi Abaye in the Talmud says he wasn't righteous at all. In other words, God had to do a miracle for him. What does that mean? It means never. This guy couldn't do it. He needed assistance from God. He needed welfare, so to speak. He wasn't able to do it on himself. But the idea was that the beauty of this Jewish understanding, indeed of the whole approach to Torah, is that ultimately there's no one. It's not a clear delineation whether in fact the miracle was exclusively within the realm of supernatural or whether it was in fact more of a natural nature. But I think the take-home lesson for all of us is that we're supposed to be looking for lessons in our life, and it can be of a total natural nature. And we could look at something and say, well, it's not of a supernatural nature, I'll dismiss it. But the idea is that we're supposed to look at things, and it could be of a supernatural nature, or it couldn't be, and something we can't fully explain, or perhaps it is something we can't explain. But if it has the potential to make and impact us and give us a message, then it is our responsibility. It behooves us to take it and make it what we can. So that's it for Parsha Beshalach. Best wishes, Shabbat Shalom. God bless.